Welcome back to Media7, where we're discussing money, meltdown and the media with Colmar Brunton's Briar Harland, psychological therapist Jock Matthews and former British Labour MP and author Brian Gould. In researching this show, we discovered the blossoming of a particular response to the global credit crunch, the satirical song. Here's a selection of some of the best and worst from YouTube. As the clouds of crisis gather, YouTube has given birth to a thriving new genre of recession-themed musical parodies. When times are tough, the Brits return to the music hall.
How do you really get someone in this shit?
I don't know. How do you really get someone in this shit?
You let them remortgage their home based on 7 times their salary.
And then you get the people who think they're Woody Bloody Guthrie.
Oh, Mr. Banker, you and all your brood.
Indeed, spare a thought for the children as a wave of ghastly folk songs sweeps the Western world.
City folk on high, contempt for us, living day by day. They took our money, made a bet. When they won, took all they could get.
This geezer got so many YouTube views he made editor's choice on the BBC website.
You're in the crunch, you're in the credit crunch, credit crunch. You can't afford your loan.
But we liked this one most of all, even if it did creep us out a bit.
And it seems to me banks live their lives throwing caution to the wind, never banking on liquidation when the rain sets in.
And finally, Britain's Halifax Bank probably picked the wrong year to go with this for a commercial.
Something tells me you're into something good. Something tells me we're into something.
So, one punter offered a remix that says a good deal about the banking crisis in 2008.
Woke up this morning feeling fine. We've a current account that
Brian, there's a number of emotions flowing through those clips, but I wonder whether is that a peculiarly British reaction? Because nearly all the ones we found, and there were a lot more than we could fit in that montage, were from Britain. Is it a British reaction, or have their banks just acted particularly egregiously?
Well, I think it's a peculiarly British genre, really. But I think the phenomenon that they're talking about, certainly writ large in Britain, but it's worldwide, and I think there is enormous anger, not least in New Zealand, at all those fat cats who told us for years, decades, that there was no alternative, that you shouldn't intervene in the market, that they could be trusted. Only they knew how to run the economy. And not only have they now been proved wrong, but they've walked away with great riches at our expense. And that's why people are angry, and they want to be sure, I think, in the longer run, once we get through this immediate crisis, that those things are not going to happen again.
How does that affect political messaging? Because you've got the Labour Party here has gone for trust.
Yes.
Barack Obama has gone for hope. These are these big single-word concepts that seem to be responding to something, don't they?
Well, I think that's the right answer. I'm not saying those particular words, but I think we are dealing in big concepts here. I think the world will have changed if this crisis has done its job. It'll never be the same again, at least not in living memory. These things tend to go in about 50 or 60-year cycles, incidentally. But I think we won't go back to that unregulated marketplace. And therefore we are going to be looking to governments, politicians, who are prepared to take responsibility for the decisions affecting the economy. At present we say, no, that's all for the bankers to decide. Interest rates? Oh, yes, the governor of the Reserve Bank. We mustn't even talk about what he should do. He's such the high priest that we mustn't interfere. It's an arcane mystery. Only he knows the answers. Nonsense. This is an important decision in the whole business of politics. If we have democratic government, then we need politicians who can be held to account for the decisions of this kind.
And yet there still needs to be a commercial market. I mean, Briar, how do you think people who still need to market goods that they hope people will buy, how do they respond if the kind of mood shift that Brian's talking about does take place?
I think one of the biggest things they need to do is to be absolutely authentic with the consumer, because it's almost like we've got a point in existence where people see through the smoke and mirrors. Or if they don't see through the smoke and mirrors, they're starting to get a little glimmery through the passage of time. And it is a case of being true, telling consumers that actually we're suffering too, because lots of businesses are, and being really clear about what they're trying to do to enhance the customer experience. And, it always tends to boil back to me and mine with people, and it's talking to the me and mine.
What do you think that businesses should do to reassure people, as a psychologist, if people are feeling anxious? What would they like to see?
In terms of getting the custom back, in terms of getting people spending again.
Because there's clearly a high degree of public anxiety that runs the risk of people staying home and not spending their money.
Well, I'm not sure whether they're going to have much influence over that. Anxiety is quite a deep-seated issue. For millennium, people have responded to being safe and secure, and if that means you keep money in your pocket in order to to live another winter or to outrun the tiger, people may not respond to that. They may say, no, you're just trying to market to us, so they will see it as inauthentic marketing. And people, I think, have got to the point where they often say, oh, it's just another ad, or that's just a news item, and they get that Peter and the Wolf, that hyperbole kind of burnout. And I'm not sure whether businesses will be able to influence
But by the same token, if they can give their message in a way that applies it so that, how they talk about cocooning, where people just, live their lives in their homes because it's safer than anywhere else. If they can take those messages and help apply their brands and products to something that matters to the consumer, their life, the benefit of their kids, then I think they've got a chance.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, marketers are experts as the media at selling an idea.
But it has to be real and it has to be true and authentic.
I don't think people will continue to not spend or not, be active in consuming. But I think there will be a shift from the, borrow and consume attitude that's developed over the last 5 to 10 years in our country, and you may comment on that, Brian, knowing a little bit more about economics. But I think there will be a hesitancy, and I think that hesitancy will have an effect, and is having an effect on retailers and people selling products and services. But I come back to that angle about the media. I mean, they engage us in this, and it's interesting how they do that. You will probably have an idea of that, how to make it more interesting and funny and,
Well, you make it seem urgent.
Exactly.
Whereas, as Brian said, this is a long-term thing. It's not as if you're going to be living on the streets tomorrow.
Yeah, but to me, part of it is that consumers will continue to keep on spending, but the choices that they make might differ. Yeah. So, we see a real resurgence in people growing their own vegetables again at the moment. So, being a plant shop is a really good thing.
I was out yesterday, over the weekend, and the queues at the local garden shop were phenomenal.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was a bit frightening, really. I thought.
The problem is, I think we're engaged in a race between conflicting pressures in the economy, and it's anybody's guess at the moment how it's going to pan out. As Brian was saying earlier, people will have more money in their pockets. The exchange rate will mean that there's more business to be done overseas. There'll be better returns on exports. On the other hand, our export markets will be decimated. The cost of credit, even though interest rates are coming down, the cost paid by banks for rolling over their credit arrangements, given that we're one of the most indebted countries in the world, that will go up. We just don't know how those factors are going to play.
It does seem that the media industry itself might be one of the ones hardest hit. We've seen both the big media newspaper chains recently move to lay off staff. APN citing a slump in recruitment and property advertising.
Yes.
So we get to find out exactly where their revenue comes from, don't we?
But that's evidence of the kind of danger, I think, that we're running. Because if we want to keep this economy afloat and buoyant, then people have got to get out there and sell their products. And I quite agree with Brian that it could be a different range of products. I mean, my guess is people are not necessarily going to travel far from home. They're not going to go on expensive foreign travel, perhaps. But they may be looking at do-it-yourself in their own homes. They'll be looking at the value of that house and seeing how is this stacking up? Can we improve it in some way? There'll be all sorts of smaller pressures of that kind, and I think clever business people and marketers will take advantage of that, and the economy needs that. That's the point.
Are there businesses you wouldn't want to be in, Brian?
Oh, I think anything related to that extreme lifestyle type of business would be something I think that will be feeling the pinch at the moment. I know that we speak with people that aren't buying their designer shoes and handbags at the same rate, that are rediscovering vintage as opposed to buying new fashion. Those are the types of things that people speak to us about as being the cutbacks, the things that they're sacrificing. But on the same token, because they say that they're not going out as much, I tend to disagree with that. I think they are going out as much, but they're just not spending as much.
Bars were pretty full in Wellington last week, actually.
That's right.
Yeah.
I think that they perceive they're going out less. But, we see so many big screen television sets being reported on as being purchased because in my cocoon, I want to watch the best possible telly. Thank you very much.
And you can probably rationalise that as saving money by not going out.
That's right. That's right.
People rationalise in all sorts of ways. And, the other thing I was going to mention is when people go through anxiety and low mood and they worry about things, they tend to think in a slightly irrational way and they justify things. But they jump to conclusions and they futurise and catastrophise and assume the worst. And the next thing they do is gather information to reassure themselves. Now, just because that's the way you think doesn't necessarily, if you give it the acid test, it doesn't mean it's going to be an accurate, reasonable way of thinking, but it makes sense to you. And that's what people are going through at the moment.
Would you sum it up as people are... it might be rational for people to be anxious because they know what's going to happen, but I get the feeling that they're anxious because they don't know what's going to happen, because they're confused about the messages they're getting. Do you think that's true?
Oh, definitely. I mean, that's why people are looking to get more information. And when there's a lack of information, people tend to gossip or talk to others. I mean, around the water machine at work, people gather information. And, there's somewhere, and I'll pull a statistic out of the air, but people find that their mood improves after they've done some gossiping, because then they find the information that's secret, insider information, and their mood improves. But I'm not sure whether it's change and the unpredictable change that's coming on that is the thing that people worry about. They can't control that.
Well, we are going to have to wind up now, and I hope we have improved your mood a little at least. Thanks to our panellists, Brian Harland, Jock Matthews and Brian Gould, and thank you for watching. Stay happy. We'll be back at the same time next week with Media7. Until then, goodbye.